Okay, I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's webinar entitled Decentralized Clinical Trials, Adoption, Trends, and Measuring Impact. Today's presentation is brought to you by Astrix, and I'll introduce our speakers in just a moment, and we can go to the next slide, please. Before we get into the actual meat of the presentation today, I did want to take a moment and introduce Astrix, tell you a little bit about the company, who we are, why we're talking to you today about these topics, and we do webinars on a very regular basis, covering a wide array of topics, including the one we're going to cover today. In terms of who we are, for over 25 years, we have a very unique breadth of highly specialized services, processes, and technology that has enabled us to become a leading partner in transforming the ways that science-based businesses succeed. And a few fast facts about the company: we were established in 1995. We like to tout that we are vendor and platform agnostic, meaning, while we're a consulting company that does work with certain systems, we're not aligned to any one system or systems. We stay agnostic. We try to help our customers select the best technology stacks for their needs that are unique to them. We operate from locations in the US and overseas with 1,200 employees, 90% of whom hold advanced science degrees, something we're very proud of. Our headquarters are in beautiful Red Bank, New Jersey, and the type of customers that we help are everybody from startups to Fortune 1000. They're typically going to be within the life science enterprise space, but we also support chemical, CPG, government agencies, as well as research institutions. We can go to the next slide, please. And then in terms of that scope, the full scope of the services that we actually deliver to customers, we like to say that we support the continuum of scientific operations and data management, but we deliver everything from strategic innovations and roadmaps, and really kind of in the beginning, helping customers really kind of define where they want to get to as far as technology, processes, digital transformation, et cetera, through the enterprise architecture aspects. This is where we're actually helping people design and architect out what their technology stack could look like to support those goals, those strategic goals of the company. Data management and governance, helping folks make sure that their digital assets are adhering to the highest levels of data integrity. Business analysis, ensuring that people, process, and technology are all optimized to transform these workflows that you're going to go through. And finally, solution selection services, which help us to pick the actual technologies to enable all that. When that's done, we can help you go through the actual development and implementation and validation of these systems. And then one of the things that's very unique about Astrix is we can help staff if need be. We can staff scientists in your organization, or we can staff technical resources to help you run these systems. So that's just a little bit about us. I don't want to spend too much time on the who. We'll get into the what and the why now. So I'd like to take a minute and introduce our speakers, and we can go to the next slide, please. So today we're going to be joined by Stuart Piles, a principal consultant, and Dan Joyce, who's a senior consultant, both with Astrix. A brief intro for both. So Stuart brings over 25 years of healthcare, life science industry, and consulting expertise to us. He's a principal consultant, and he leads a strategic innovation practice that specializes in helping life science R&D companies develop business and data strategies that hopefully help them transform their business. For Dan's part, Dan has a background in biotechnology and education and brings more than 10 years of scientific and consulting experience in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries. Again, as a senior consultant, he specializes in helping life science R&D companies develop business strategies that help to transform their organizations as well. So Stuart and Dan, great to have you both with us today for the presentation. I believe, Stuart, you're going to pick us up from here. I'm going to sit back and enjoy the presentation like the rest of the folks on, and I'll come back on at the end to wrap up and do some questions.
All right, thank you, everyone. Well, first, thanks everyone for joining today. Again, we wanted to take some time and share our observations and working with our clients around decentralized clinical trials in terms of adoptions and trends, as well as measuring impact. And really the focus is around the changing ecosystem, if you will, around patient access, and how that is driving the different types of interactions we need to have with the various stakeholders, as well as with the sponsors, and how process technology, interoperability, digital maturity all go into the equation of providing patient-centric, patient-enabled services.
Yeah, so as we think about how decentralized clinical trials are defined, and what do we mean by DCT? I think it's important to kind of level set and understand that DCT is more than just about how the FDA has it defined. There's certainly been a lot of focus on some of the more common elements over to the left-hand side of that spectrum around electronic informed consent, ECOA, telemedicine. But there's important considerations and certainly a drive and a need to move forward across the DCT spectrum. And we really need to be thinking about other additional, more advanced approaches, moving ourselves from that left over to the right. There has been, there's definitely has been a significant attention and emphasis on DCT lately, and an explosion in DCT offerings. But the reality is that there's still remains a lot more to explore, a lot more to understand in terms of the technology, in terms of what the technology can support, how the technology, how the DCT approaches may impact how trials are designed and managed. And ultimately, the aim is driving towards this concept of patient centricity or digital patient enablement. The focus really needs to go beyond just being able to implement these types of offerings, but to think about enabling DCT in order to begin to bring down barriers to sites, to sponsors, and patients in the industry today. Then, so as we think ahead, if the goals or the outcomes of DCT are to accelerate clinical development, enable that patient centricity that I mentioned, and support being able to deliver strong evidence packages, we need to consider then how to further expand DCT. And we need to think about expanding beyond those kind of more common or most common capabilities into more advanced, technology-enabled capabilities. And so as we think about moving across that spectrum, with that comes additional considerations. You need to be able to support increasingly complex data landscapes with new and additional sources of data, different ways of capturing that data, transferring and integrating within a broader ecosystem. Those types of considerations become ever more important. There's opportunity in here for sponsors to accelerate, to go beyond the pace that traditional study models will afford, and also at the same time look for ways to reduce both site and patient burdens compared to more traditional trial models.
Okay. So as Dan was highlighting, and we kind of take a look, we put together a little bit of a graphic over to the right, and it's more from a illustrative standpoint versus really a quantitative analysis. And what becomes important as we look at this journey and we look at the accelerated use of DCT in the industry is again around the level of digitalization. How well are things connected, as well as the level of patient centricity, or you can think of it as customer centricity. How well are we interfacing not only with sites, but with the patients and some of the longer term vision within HCPs or other care entities as we talked around kind of the change and continuum. And so what we see, and it's not a bad trend, it's what you would expect, that when you think about site solutions around practice management technologies and all of that, they're focused within the space the same way as some of the more traditional CRO capabilities, they're within there. But as we look at where things are really accelerated over the last 3 years, even slightly before the pandemic, and then very much so through the pandemic, is the emergence and growth to some degree of the enterprise solution providers that we are most commonly associated with doing clinical trials, but in the space of the digital CROs, as well as in the device space with the concept of medical home, virtual care, and that also extends down into a litany of kind of emerging or expanding DCT-specific providers as well. And it's very important that we're seeing those changes, right? So if you go back 2 years ago, there really wasn't as much interoperability, right? We still have limited solutions, but there are starting to look around the exchange and enabling of information from a patient to a site to a sponsor. And we are seeing things around AI and machine learning, and again, as I noted, around the growth of digital diagnostics. A key thing to think about is that there's lots of great tools, lots of great things that are there, but we always face the need that sites will want to use their own tech, and that's something that a burden that's going to have to be recognized in any effective DCT strategy going forward. So taking another kind of view, there is no test on this. It's a bit of an eye chart. But we wanted to share a little bit around kind of where is a lot of our work being done, and what are the things that we're doing with our customers in this space, and what are our customers asking for. And we've organized this around the 3 quadrants over in the left around foundational innovation and enabling in the middle. And what we see is that the majority of our clients are clearly in the foundational space, with some moving up into the enabling, and then a few up into the innovation. What becomes clear, there are some key things, not only around looking at telemedicine and home health and getting into coordination of care, but thinking around digital protocol and so you can have automated workflow, and looking at e-content document exchange so that you can look at monitoring, and then thinking forward into risk-based and remote monitoring in terms of how that influences and designs within the actual protocol. And then considerations such as API virtual studies, so that you can remove barriers or enable things such as bring your own tech or bring your own device that we're seeing. One of the common things that we find in working with our customers is something around being able to clearly have a view of what DCT capabilities and who those service providers are being provided, is something that is really one of the first things we start with a lot of times, in order to understand what the capability is and help the organization start to shape and form some of their strategies within this space.
All right, so as we think about and think more about how we implement what we implement, another key component of that is being able to measure the impact of these different approaches, of these different elements to decentralized clinical trials. And so, as we get through that point of adoption, as we progress, it's important to understand and be able to measure both short and long-term value, determine how best to measure that value. There's a need ultimately to look at how to create both value and differentiation, in terms of then understanding the impacts of DCT enablement, and this then helps companies assess where and how to invest, how to measure the outcomes, and how to measure the impacts of DCT, how to measure that against trials that they are sponsoring, managing, impacts to sites, and impacts to that overall digital patient experience. So we should be thinking about, how do we improve, things like the real-time site and patient data collection, collaboration. How do we reduce and work to eliminate patient and site burdens? How do we, be able to examine and measure the impacts to overall data accuracy and completeness as well? So DCT goes beyond the sponsor value. It must also be able to show value to both patients and to sites. Again, kind of completing that that entire circle of overall kind of digital trial enablement and digital patient centricity. So we think about some of, we have kind of the dividing line here as we look from the left and over to the right, and we think about some of these different areas. How do we look into them and work to measure our capabilities and measure ultimately the outcomes and the effectiveness of these different aspects, and allow that then to help kind of build that picture of what elements do you go after, and that are going to help build out that overall kind of DCT portfolio and stack that that you may be looking to adopt on any given trial. And so, how do we get there? How do we get to leveraging those approaches? How do we get to adoption and measuring the impact? It really comes down to digital transformation and changing the ways of working, transforming business and operating models, rethinking, how value, how patient and site experiences ultimately are delivered.
And as Dan pointed out, and we showed on some of the other slides, it is around continuous improvement. What you implemented, even 2 years ago, there's been, significant changes, and we do see a rapid pace and change in a lot of the capabilities that are offered, whether it's from, patient recruitment to site enablement, and some of the things that are there. And when we work with the clients and look at the longer term roadmaps of the vendors and suppliers, we're seeing a lot of innovation and some level of disruption taking place. So you really need to think about an agile transformation and concepts like hackathons and other things. And as we saw in the other slide, innovation labs, different ways of working in order to enable this, looking at the structure of the SOPs even, so they are less technology oriented and at a high enough level that gives you a lot of flexibility in order to pilot a particular piece of technology and really maybe only have to work on a job aid type of it, or have really any demonstrative impact in the overall process. And so those are some examples there, but it really starts to look at the concept of human centricity, right? And how can you really foster that, taking that customer experience, empowering the workforce, and again, as I noted, around continuous improvement. So that's what we wanted to share with you today. We could spend hours on a lot of these topics, but we wanted to be able to, and we will have additional ones in this space going deeper into it. But we wanted to kind of start out as we are, doing work, as I said, with our clients around the DCT and what we're seeing as kind of our first iteration to it. And be able to share that with you today. So we welcome that. Dan, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say.
I think, Stuart, you covered it pretty well. I mean, excuse me, as you said, this scratches the surface and I think sets some of the foundation for for deeper dives. There's a lot here and a lot to that requires kind of careful consideration as clients, sponsors either embark on or continue to enhance and mature their capabilities in this space.
So with that, we'll turn it over. We wanted to make sure that we had enough time for questions from the team, for the folks on the call today. So with that, we'll turn it over to any questions anybody may have.
Yeah, and let me reiterate, thank you so much for that, guys. As far as questions go, what you do is just go down to the GoToWebinar panel, type your question in, we'll read the question out loud. We won't read your name, we won't read your company, etc. We kind of keep that confidential. We'll go ahead and stop the recording part at this